An 89-year-old man was humiliated at a café, but what a stranger did next left him in tears. It was a cold winter morning when 89-year-old Charlie Jackson decided to visit his favorite café, the kind of place where he'd go every Friday for the past 30 years, sipping on a cup of black coffee and watching the world go by. But today, something was different. Something that would change his life forever, and not in the way he expected. As Charlie walked in, his old knees creaking with every step, he noticed a few people sitting at the tables chatting and laughing. The cafe was warm, and the smell of freshly baked bread filled the air. But for Charlie, the comfort of this familiar place was about to be shattered. The barista, a young woman with a name tag that read Kelsey, looked at him with a confused expression. She didn't recognize him at first, even though he'd been coming here every week without fail for decades. Charlie, with his snow-white hair and a weathered face full of stories, asked for his usual black coffee with no sugar. He smiled kindly, expecting the same warm welcome he always received. But today, Kelsey did something that left him speechless. Without a word, she turned around and made no effort to start preparing his order. Charlie stood there, stunned. What was happening? This was his cafe. This was his routine. But today, it felt as though he didn't belong. The minutes ticked by, and Charlie's hands began to tremble. The cafe was busy, yes, but this was different. Kelsey, the barista, ignored him completely, serving the younger customers around him with a smile. What was going on? Was it because of his age? Was he being treated this way because he was old? Then, something shocking happened. A woman at the table near the window, a young lady with a big smile, noticed the discomfort on Charlie's face. She was watching the whole scene unfold, her eyes narrowing as she saw how Charlie was being ignored. The woman, who had been sipping her coffee alone, stood up and walked toward the counter. She didn't say a word to Charlie, but the determined look on her face said everything. Charlie felt his heart race. Was this woman going to help? Would she stand up for him? He had no idea, but he couldn't look away. What happened next was nothing short of jaw-dropping. The young woman reached the counter, walked straight up to Kelsey, and with a firm but gentle voice she said, "Excuse me, could you make this gentleman his coffee first?" Kelsey looked at her with confusion, her eyebrows furrowed. "He's been waiting," the woman added, her tone growing more insistent. "You don't just leave someone standing there like that. He's a customer just like everyone else." At first, Kelsey didn't react, but the young woman wasn't done. She leaned in closer, her voice soft but full of authority. "He comes here every week. He's part of this cafe's history, and you owe him respect. I want to make sure he gets his coffee first." The entire cafe had gone quiet. All eyes were on them. Charlie could hardly believe it. The woman wasn't just standing up for him, she was demanding fairness in the most surprising way. Kelsey hesitated for a moment. She looked at Charlie and then back at the young woman, as if deciding whether to fight back or do the right thing. The silence hung heavy in the air. But then, something incredible happened. Kelsey finally nodded. She gave Charlie a warm, genuine smile and quickly made his coffee, placing it on the counter with a quiet, "Sorry for the wait, sir." Charlie's heart swelled with emotion. This wasn't just about coffee. This was about kindness, about standing up when things weren't right. But the story wasn't over yet. The young woman wasn't finished with her act of kindness. As Charlie reached for his coffee, ready to leave, he felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned around to find the same woman standing there, holding a small envelope in her hand. "This is for you," she said softly, handing it to him. Charlie looked at the envelope, confused but touched. He didn't recognize her, but there was something so warm in her eyes that he couldn't bring himself to say no. He took the envelope, but before he could even open it, she gave him a reassuring smile. "Open it when you get home," she said, and before Charlie could respond, she turned and walked out the door, leaving him with more questions than answers. Charlie's heart raced as he walked slowly to his seat by the window, the envelope still clutched in his hand. What was inside? What did this mysterious woman want to give him? Was she just a kind soul, or was there more to this story than he could ever have imagined? The cafe was quiet now, the tension from the earlier confrontation slowly lifting. Charlie looked down at the envelope, his hands trembling not from age but from anticipation. He couldn't wait to get home and find out what lay inside. But just as he was about to leave, something strange happened. The barista, Kelsey, walked over to him again, this time with a different look on her face. It was as if she had changed, softened somehow. She leaned over the counter, avoiding eye contact, and quietly said, "I'm sorry about earlier. I didn't mean to treat you that way. I wasn't having a good day, and I didn't think." Charlie stared at her, still holding the envelope. "It's all right," he said softly, his voice shaky but calm. "Everyone has bad days." But Kelsey wasn't finished. "No," she said, shaking her head. "It's not all right. What I did was wrong. I just wanted to let you know I'm sorry, and I'll make sure to treat everyone with respect from now on." Charlie's heart warmed, and for a brief moment, he forgot about the envelope in his hands. He could see the sincerity in Kelsey's eyes. It wasn't just an apology, it was a true moment of realization. Something had clicked in her mind. Something had changed. Just before he left, Kelsey added, "Oh, and there's a little surprise for you, from the woman who helped you. She paid for your coffee today." Charlie's jaw dropped. The young woman? Who was she? What was her story? Why had she done all this for him? As Charlie stepped out of the cafe, clutching the envelope tightly, his mind was spinning. He couldn't wait to open it, to discover the mystery behind this kind stranger who had turned his ordinary day into something unforgettable. But as he walked home, something inside him told him that this was just the beginning of a much bigger story, one that would change everything he thought he knew about kindness and about the power of a single act of compassion. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for the next part of Charlie's incredible story. Copy the link to share with your friends. This is one heartwarming tale you won't want to miss. Charlie couldn't shake the feeling that something life-changing was about to unfold. The envelope he held in his hand seemed to pulse with mystery, and with every step he took toward his little apartment, his curiosity grew stronger. Who was the woman who had stood up for him? Why had she paid for his coffee? And what was in the envelope that had made her hand it to him with such urgency? By the time Charlie reached his apartment, the sun was starting to set, casting long shadows across the street. He unlocked his door with shaky fingers, still thinking about the day's strange events. As he stepped inside, he gently placed the envelope on his kitchen table. The room was quiet, just the way Charlie liked it. He took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart before opening it. For a moment, he stared at the envelope, trying to decipher its contents. There was no name, no return address, just the words, "For Charlie," written in neat handwriting across the front. The paper was thick, almost like a letter from a long-lost friend. His hands trembled as he slowly ripped the edge, wondering what he would find. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of paper. Charlie unfolded it and read the message that was written in bold, careful letters. "Dear Charlie, you don't know me, but I know you. You've been coming to that cafe every Friday for years. You sit by the window, sip your coffee, and watch the world go by. I noticed you one day when I was younger, and you've been a part of my life ever since. You've inspired me in ways you will never understand. But I need to tell you something important. You have no idea how many people's lives you've touched without even realizing it. The way you've lived your life, your kindness, your quiet strength. It's something that's left an imprint on everyone you've met. I've always admired you, Charlie. You were a guiding light when I needed one the most, even though you had no idea who I was. And today I couldn't just sit back and watch you be ignored. I needed to do something, to give back a little of what you gave me. You've taught me the power of kindness, even in the smallest moments. Now I hope this note can remind you of your own value. I've left something in this envelope for you, something that I think you'll find useful, something that will show you how much you mean to me. With all my gratitude, a friend who will never forget you." Charlie sat there, stunned. The words on the paper were so simple, yet so profound. A stranger, someone he had never met, had been watching him all these years. She had been inspired by his quiet presence at the café. He couldn't believe it. His eyes welled up with tears as he slowly reread the note, the words sinking in with every passing second. The idea that his small actions had left such a lasting impact on someone was more than he could have ever imagined. But there was more. As Charlie finished reading, a small object slipped out from the folded paper. It was a key, a simple brass key with a note attached to it. Charlie picked it up, his hands shaking even more now. He could hardly believe what he was seeing. A key? What was it for? The note attached to the key read, "This key opens a door to something you've been waiting for. Don't worry, you'll know exactly where to go when the time is right." Charlie stared at the key, a mixture of confusion and excitement filling his chest. What did it mean? What door? Why had she left him this mysterious key? For a moment, Charlie felt completely lost. Was this a joke? Some kind of strange prank? But then, deep down, he knew it wasn't. There was something so genuine about the note, something that made his heart feel lighter, more hopeful than it had in a long time. Maybe, just maybe, this was the universe's way of telling him that his life was far from over, that there were still adventures to be had, even at 89. Charlie spent the rest of the evening trying to figure out what the key was for. He walked around his apartment, holding it in his palm like a precious treasure. Was there a door he had forgotten about? A place he had never noticed? Or was this some kind of metaphor, telling him to open his heart to new possibilities? He didn't know, but there was one thing he was sure of. He couldn't ignore the message. He had to find out what the key unlocked. The next day, Charlie returned to the cafe as he always did on Fridays. But this time, he wasn't just going for his usual coffee. He was on a mission. He wasn't sure what he was looking for, but something inside him told him that the answer was waiting for him. As he walked through the door, he noticed something unusual. The cafe was quieter than usual, and there were fewer people. But behind the counter stood Kelsey, the barista who had made things right the day before. She looked up and smiled when she saw him, but this time, there was something different in her eyes. Something warmer. Charlie walked up to the counter, the key hidden in his pocket. He felt a strange sense of anticipation, as if he was about to discover something important. "Good morning, Charlie," Kelsey greeted him. "What can I get you today?" Charlie smiled, but instead of ordering his usual coffee, he leaned in slightly, his voice low. "I'm looking for something unusual today, something that might be hidden in this cafe." Kelsey blinked, clearly caught off guard. "What do you mean?" she asked, her tone uncertain. Charlie pulled the key from his pocket and placed it on the counter between them. "I think this belongs here," he said quietly. Kelsey's face went pale as she stared at the key. She didn't say anything for a long moment, but then her eyes widened and her lips parted. Where did you get that?" Charlie simply smiled, his heart racing. He had no idea what would happen next, but he knew one thing for sure. The next chapter of his story was about to begin, and it was going to be something he could never have predicted. Kelsey's face turned a shade paler as she stared at the brass key Charlie had placed on the counter. Her hands trembled slightly, and for the first time since Charlie had known her, she seemed genuinely nervous. The whole atmosphere in the cafe had shifted. The quiet murmur of conversations, the clinking of cups, and the smell of fresh coffee all seemed to fade into the background as the mystery of the key took center stage. I don't know where that came from," Kelsey said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But there's something I've been meaning to tell you for a long time." Charlie felt his pulse quicken. This was the moment. He could feel it. Something was unfolding, something he couldn't have imagined in his wildest dreams. The key wasn't just a symbol. It was a key to a deeper mystery, one tied to the very cafe he had visited every week for decades. Kelsey looked around the cafe, almost as if checking to see if anyone was listening, then lowered her voice even further. There's a door you can't see, but I know where it is. I've always known. It's been hidden right here in the cafe for as long as I can remember. And I think you're the one who's supposed to find it." Charlie's mind spun as he processed her words. A hidden door? In this cafe? For years, he had sat in the same spot by the window, never imagining there could be something more behind the walls of this familiar space. He had always assumed it was just a quaint little cafe, the kind you go to for comfort. But now, the mystery was taking a turn Charlie couldn't have predicted. Before Charlie could respond, Kelsey continued. "The key you have, it's not just for any door, it's for that door, the one behind the bookshelf." She paused, then lowered her voice even more. "But no one can know about it. No one but you." Charlie blinked. "The bookshelf?" he repeated, trying to make sense of her words. Kelsey nodded, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "There's a section of the wall behind the cafe counter that looks like a normal bookshelf, but it's not. It's a doorway, hidden in plain sight. The key you have is meant to open it." Charlie's breath caught in his chest. A secret door? How had he never noticed it before? How had no one else seen it? This was more than just a cafe. It was a puzzle, and Charlie had just been handed the missing piece. "You're sure about this?" Charlie asked, his voice trembling. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. A hidden door? A key? It all felt too surreal, like something out of a movie. Kelsey hesitated for a moment, looking down at the counter. "I've seen it before," she admitted. "My grandmother used to work here. She told me stories about the door when I was a little girl, but after she passed away, I didn't want to believe her. It seemed too crazy. But now, seeing the key in your hands, I think it's time. I think it's finally time for someone to open it." Charlie's mind raced. Was this some kind of hidden treasure? Or was there something far more significant behind that door? Kelsey seemed to notice the confusion in his eyes. She smiled softly, a sad, almost nostalgic smile. "I know this is a lot to take in. I never thought I'd be the one telling you this. But I believe you're the one who's meant to uncover whatever is behind that door." Before Charlie could respond, Kelsey reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. She handed it to him. "This is a map," she said quietly. "It's not much, but it's enough to guide you. It'll show you where the door is and how to open it. But remember, you can't tell anyone. If this gets out, everything will change." Charlie took the map from her hands, his heart pounding in his chest. The paper felt ancient, like it had been folded and unfolded many times over the years. He unfolded it carefully, studying the strange markings and the vague outline of the cafe. In the corner, he could make out a small, hidden section, right behind the bookshelf where Kelsey had pointed. "This is incredible," Charlie whispered, more to himself than to Kelsey. "I never imagined—" Kelsey gave him a sad look. "It's been waiting for a long time. Whoever opens it, well, they'll have to be ready for what's on the other side. This isn't just a cafe secret. It's something much, much bigger." Charlie nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He wasn't sure what lay behind that door, but he knew one thing for sure. His life was about to change forever. The next few days were a blur of anticipation and anxiety. Charlie couldn't stop thinking about the hidden door in the cafe. He kept going back, each time trying to catch a glimpse of the bookshelf that Kelsey had mentioned. But every time, he came up empty. It was as if the door had vanished, as if it only revealed itself to those who truly believed. Finally, on his next visit to the cafe, Charlie decided he couldn't wait any longer. He had the key, the map, and now, more than ever, he felt ready. The curiosity gnawed at him. He had to know what was behind that door. As he entered the cafe, he didn't head to his usual spot. Instead, he made a beeline for the counter. Kelsey was there, her back to him, preparing coffee. Without a word, Charlie stepped toward the bookshelf behind her, his fingers clutching the key tightly in his hand. The cafe was busier than usual that morning. People chatted, laughing, oblivious to the secret unfolding just a few feet away. Charlie moved slowly, trying to keep his movements discreet. He reached the bookshelf, his eyes scanning the wooden shelves stacked with old books and trinkets. Everything looked perfectly normal, until he noticed a faint outline in the wood that didn't quite match the rest. Charlie took a deep breath, looking back at Kelsey. She didn't seem to notice him, lost in her work. Carefully, he slid his fingers along the edge of the bookshelf, finding the spot where the outline was most prominent. His heart raced as he inserted the key into a small, hidden keyhole that he hadn't noticed before. With a soft click, the bookshelf gave way. A hidden door began to creak open in front of him. What was behind that door? Charlie could feel his breath catch in his throat. He was about to find out. The door creaked open with an eerie slowness, almost as if it hadn't been touched in years, perhaps decades. Charlie's heart raced faster with every inch it revealed, the dim light from the café spilling into the narrow, hidden space behind the bookshelf. He could barely believe what he was seeing. His hands shook, not from age, but from the thrill of discovery. As the door slowly opened wider, Charlie stepped forward cautiously, his senses on high alert. The air behind the bookshelf was thick with dust, untouched by the busy life of the café. It felt like stepping into another world entirely. The faint smell of old wood, the scent of time that had long passed, filled his nostrils. There was a small, dark hallway just beyond the door, lit only by a faint, flickering light bulb hanging overhead. Charlie hesitated for a moment. What was he getting himself into? But there was no turning back now. He had the key, the map, and the confidence of a man who had been given a purpose. He took a deep breath, his heart thundering in his chest, and stepped inside. The door closed softly behind him with a soft thud. For a moment he stood there, listening. The sounds of the café, the laughter, the clinking of coffee cups, were suddenly muffled, as if he had stepped into a different dimension entirely. The walls of the narrow hallway were lined with old, faded portraits and yellowed newspaper clippings, some of them almost unrecognizable. It was as if the hallway was a relic of the past, a time capsule waiting to be discovered. At the far end of the hallway, Charlie noticed a door. This one was much older than the one he had just opened. The wood was worn, its edges chipped from years of neglect. The air in this part of the cafe felt different, charged with mystery, with history. His fingers tightened around the key in his hand. Was this it? Was this the door he was meant to open? Charlie's breath caught in his throat as he approached the door. He could feel a strange warmth emanating from it, as if it were alive, waiting for him to unlock its secrets. He inserted the key into the old lock, the metal clicking with a soft sound. The door creaked open, revealing what lay behind it. What Charlie saw next left him speechless. His eyes widened as he took in the scene before him. The room was filled with old furniture, books, and objects that looked like they belonged in a museum. But what caught his attention the most was the large, ornate desk in the center of the room. On top of it, there was a dusty leather-bound book, its pages yellowed with age. Next to the book was a small wooden box, intricately carved with symbols Charlie couldn't understand. There was an overwhelming sense of silence in the room, as if it had been untouched for centuries. Everything in this hidden space seemed frozen in time. It was as though someone had left in a hurry, leaving everything exactly as it was. Charlie felt the urge to explore, his curiosity pulling him toward the desk. He stepped forward and carefully opened the leather-bound book. The pages were brittle, and the handwriting inside was elegant, yet unfamiliar. The language was strange, almost as if it belonged to another time or place. But as he flipped through the pages, one thing became clear. This wasn't just any old book. It was a journal that chronicled something important, something far bigger than Charlie could have imagined. He paused, his finger hovering over a page. There, in the corner, written in the same strange language, was one word that made his heart stop. The word legacy. Legacy? What did it mean? And how did it connect to him? Charlie's mind raced. Had this secret room been waiting for him all these years? Was he the key to something much bigger than he realized? Suddenly, a voice broke the silence. Charlie! Charlie spun around, his heart pounding. He had been so absorbed in the journal, he hadn't noticed anyone else entering the room. Kelsey stood at the entrance, her face pale and her eyes wide with a mixture of concern and fear. You shouldn't be here, she whispered, stepping into the room. You don't know what you've opened. You don't know what's at stake. Charlie's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? What is all this? He gestured to the room, to the journal, to the box on the desk. This is all part of the cafe's history, isn't it? Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me find it? Kelsey took a deep breath and looked away, as if struggling with something inside her. I didn't want to get you involved, she said quietly. But now that you've found it, there's no turning back. This room holds secrets. Secrets about this cafe, about your family, and about the legacy you've unknowingly inherited. Charlie felt a chill run down his spine. My family? What do you mean? Kelsey's eyes softened, but there was a sadness in them that Charlie couldn't ignore. I've been guarding this secret for years, Charlie. My grandmother told me stories when I was a child, but I didn't understand them until now. Your family, your grandfather was part of something huge. He helped build this cafe, but he was also involved in something much darker. The journal you found. It's part of a history that goes back generations. And I'm afraid that now that you've opened that door, things are about to get much more complicated. Charlie's head spun. What do you mean by darker? What are you trying to say? Kelsey walked toward the desk, her eyes fixed on the journal. Your grandfather made a choice, Charlie. A choice that has followed your family for years. A choice that's about to catch up with you. Charlie's throat went dry. He reached for the journal, but Kelsey grabbed his hand before he could touch it. Listen to me, she said urgently. You can't just read the journal. It's not a story. It's a warning. And if you don't understand the gravity of what you're about to uncover, you'll be dragged into something far bigger than you ever imagined. This cafe, the door, the journal, it's all connected to something dangerous. Charlie's mind was spinning. What had his grandfather been involved in? What dark secrets was Kelsey talking about? Why had she been keeping this from him all these years? But before he could ask another question, the room seemed to darken, the air growing heavy and tense. It felt as though someone, was watching him. And suddenly, the wooden box on the desk rattled.